I'd like to spend just a minute going over the idea of paying points on a mortgage and how exactly that works. So the first thing I have set up over here is the same situation from the video on how to build an amortization table. So I had supposed that I'm purchasing a home for 100,000, and so at this interest rate of 4.25% annually, um, divided by 12 gives me my monthly rate, and the payment calculated from that is $491.94. Okay, so let me go back here for a second. 4.25, 30 years at 12 times a year. $100,000 is the present value. I want my future value to be 0. In other words, I want to pay this thing off, and so there's my $491.94. So then I have my amortization table here, balance, interest, principal, and end balance, just like we built in the video. So you can see down at the bottom that our balance is 0 after 360 months. Now with the exception of a few cents, but that's just rounding error. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to suppose that we can buy down our mortgage. We can buy down our interest rate by paying a point. And so that's basically 1% of the present value of the loan. Now, normally you can do this, you can buy down your points, you can buy down your interest rate more by paying more points, but we'll just focus on 1% of the present value of the loan. Okay, so in this case, we notice that, oh, and by the way, normally this amount varies, but let's just assume we can buy it down a 1/4% off the annual rate, nominal rate. Okay, so what that means is that instead of paying this 4.25%, I can basically pay a flat 4% as long as I go ahead and pay 1%. Okay, well the points that I would have to pay, I'm going to create another column over here. Now notice I'm going to have two tables. I have one amortization table that's set at these values, and then I'm going to have another amortization that's going to be set at the new payment after I pay down my points. So my points are going to be 1%. Oops. So 0.01 times my present value. Now this doesn't actually buy down the present value at all. This is basically a fee for reducing my interest rate. So you might say, oh great, well, I'll pay money and I'll be able to buy a lower rate, which means a lower payment. Well, it's not always worth it, and we're going to find out why. So present value is still going to be 100,000. In other words, we didn't change that at all. Our monthly rate is going to be 0.04 now, because 4% divided by 12. So you can notice that this is a slightly smaller value than this over here. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did before. I'm going to label these months 1 through 360. So what I can basically do is scroll down, make sure your month 1 is highlighted, hit shift, and left click, and that will allow you to highlight all those cells. So I'm just going to hit copy. You can hit right click over that and click copy, and then come over to months and right click paste, and that way we have all the months intact. Now the balance, we want to start off being the 100,000, and the interest is going to be the rate times whatever the balance is. So in this particular month we're going to pay $333.33 in interest. Well, now we need to get the payment, so we're going to come back here and say, okay, well now that we've paid 1%, we get to reduce our interest rate, which if we change one thing, that's going to change another. And you'll notice that my payment reduces down to $477. Well, to a lot of people, they might look at this and say, okay, well, 20 bucks is not worth $1,000, and depending on how long you keep the house, that may or may not be a valid point. So $477.42 is our new payment. Okay, so we've got that. Now our principal, of course, is equal to our payment. Now I want to fix this, so I'm going to hit F4 to lock it in place. Minus the interest will be what the principal is. And then my balance will be, take your original balance, subtract off the principal that you paid, and now we owe slightly less than 100,000. Okay, we're going to come back to the savings column. Now, basically, I can go ahead and say, now my new balance is going to be my end balance from the last month. My interest, I can just go ahead and copy and paste this formula down, but one thing I need to do is make sure J5 is locked so that it doesn't shift. I want to make sure it keeps accessing that monthly rate. And now as I paste it, you'll notice that the balance moves down, but the blue box stays in place. That's exactly what we want. Principal, we want to be payment minus the interest, so I'm going to copy, paste that. Double check it, make sure it's subtracting the right things. And then the ending balance is still going to be the balance minus the principal, so I can copy that down. And so now I'm going to just go ahead and repeat this process 358 more times by just clicking, highlighting that row, clicking copy, and then I'm going to come all the way down to 360, right click, paste. Okay, so now I should verify. If we haven't made any mistake, this should be approximately 0, which it is. Again, a little bit of rounding error. And now what we're going to do is we're going to calculate our savings. So we're going to have two types of savings here. One of them is going to be payment savings. In other words, we save something off of the overall payment. But additionally, you'll notice that the amount of principal isn't the same. So basically, the more that we pay towards principal means the less that we pay towards interest. So each month, not only are we saving a physical dollar amount, but we're also saving principal. So I'm going to write principal paid, or I should say extra principal paid. Okay, so now what this means is each month, well, I'm going to save in terms of my payments. So my payments are lower, which means that I'm going to take my payment savings, or in other words, my old payment, and I'm going to lock that in place because I want the payment savings to be this fixed amount. And then I'm going to subtract away the new payment, again, lock it in place so that we can notice there's roughly a $14.52 difference. Now the cool thing is if I copy and paste that, you'll notice that it doesn't change, which is good. That's why we want them locked in place. Now, like we said, we also save money that we don't actually see in our pockets, but we do save money in terms of the amount of principal that's going towards our balance. So this first month, we actually pay an additional, so I'm going to take the new principal, subtract away the old principal, and that means that I'm actually paying my loan down by $6.31 more in this situation than in the previous situation, beginning from month 1. Okay, so that means my total savings is going to be the sum of those two values. So it's going to equal my payment savings plus my extra principal paid, which means I save an extra $20.83 a month. Again, it depends how you view this. If you just want to make payment savings, that's different, but you have to also consider the extra principal paid because that's actually money that you're basically, in essence, saving that month from basically paying excess interest. Okay, so now I'm gonna delete these because these cells are locked, and because I always want to be subtracting my my new principal minus my old one. Notice that they always vary. So this $6.31 is not always going to be the same. So I want it to shift. And then I always want to add the payment savings plus the extra principal paid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these three cells, and I'm going to scroll all the highlight all the way down to the bottom of the table until I get to 360 months. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and right click paste, and now we should be able to see that, well, one, the payment savings is always fixed because we're saving $14.52, but our extra principal paid, notice that it's changing. That basically the difference between principal paid each month becomes a lesser amount as time goes on. Now that's just the effect of time, that you pay less interest, you pay more principal, and so they're kind of balancing out. And then by the time we get down to the very bottom, we've got some kind of weird things happening. So hopefully we don't actually need to go that far. You'll notice that actually you're starting to pay more principal in the other account than you are in the current one. And that's just because of the difference in the interest rate and the amount of the balance owed and the fact that the payment's bigger. Okay, so basically what I want to do is I want to figure out when is my total saved at least the $1,000 that I put towards points. In other words, I want to make sure that I save $1,000 worth that I have $1,000 worth of savings before I say I've broken even. So basically, right down here at the very bottom, if you just come to this little toolbar here and you right-click, you'll notice that you get all these different customized status bar options. Now we just want to make sure that this sum option is checked. So what this is going to do for us is it's going to be an easy way for me basically just to be able to highlight a bunch of total saved cells by clicking and holding down, and you'll notice down here it tells me the sum of those values. So as I go down, I can notice that, well, I just want to make sure that my sum gets to $1,000. So I'm going to keep going until I reach 1,000. I just kind of skipped it there. And you'll notice that between month, looks like 48 and month 49, once I've made my 49th payment, that's when I've officially reached my total points paid. So my conclusion is, first of all, I'm going to highlight these to indicate I need to pay 49 months worth of payments before I see my $1,000 back. So in other words, if you keep this house for less than, for basically 4 years or less, because 48 months divided by 12, 49 months divided by 12, you'll notice that's slightly over 4 years. So if I don't keep this house for more than 4 years, I'm actually not going to benefit from paying points. And for most people, I don't know what the exact average is right now, but people tend to not stay in their houses for longer than a few years. So that's something to take into account, whether this is going to be worth it. Now, if you want to base this strictly off of the payment savings, in other words, I want to be able to see that money back in my pocket, well, it's going to take a little bit longer. You'll notice that if I just focus on that payment, it's not until month, what is this, month 69, this is where I physically see my $1,000 fee paid back. And this is after 69 months. So 69 divided by 12, well, that's almost 6 years. That's 5 3/4 years before you see your $1,000 back, just in terms of raw savings. So is it a good plan? Well, if you plan on living in a house for 30 years, you definitely want to buy down your mortgage. Problem is, most people don't. So hopefully this has been helpful and has given you some insight. There's a lot more to this that we're not showing. This is kind of just the basic idea. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.